The Washington Nationals have fired their staff members who have refused to get vaccinated. They were told either you get vaccinated by August 26 or you will face the consequences. Is it considered forcing someone to get the vaccine if you tell them they'll be fired unless they do? I think the answer to that is obviously yes. Is it considered forcing someone to undergo a medical procedure, albeit a small one? If they want to go to restaurants or bars or live their life like normal, they must do it? Yes. It is the use of government force on private businesses, telling them what to do and telling the individual you need your ID and you need proof of vaccination. Is it considered force in New York City when there is no religious or medical exemption? Yes, it is. Now, can people just quit their jobs? Of course they can. No one's holding you down and injecting you with the vaccine. Can people just leave New York City? Yes, of course. No one's showing up to your home in New York and then pinning against a wall and injecting you with a vaccine. However, it's still force. And is it reasonable to expect people to move because, say, their doctor said they couldn't get the vaccine? New York has no religious and no medical exemption. Now I got another question, because I want to talk to you about the Satanic Temple, and I don't have too much beef with these guys, but I do hope they come out against vaccine mandates, because I have some more questions. Is it considered force when the state says you are not allowed to get an abortion? To an extent, yes. There's an application of force. The government will stop you, or you will be penalized in some way if you do this action. There is an application of force. Absolutely. Is it a use of force when you say there is a medical exception for abortion? If there's an issue pertaining to the baby's health and the mother's health, there are exemptions. Okay. They say that there's an exemption for incest. There's an exemption for rape. And you have a 6 week window to perform an abortion or get one for no reason. Is that use of force? Yes, it still is a use of force. You are setting where you will intervene to apply force from the state to prevent a certain action. But let's be real. Could someone just leave Texas? Absolutely. They could. So no one's holding these women down and forcing them to give birth. No one's forcing them to get pregnant in the first place, except for those who are victims of rape, in which case the government does have an exemption in Texas. So here's what I'm getting at. Most of you who follow me, and many of you who disagree with me, know that I am actually pro-choice, and I am consistently across the board for a very obvious reason. This is my body. It's all I have. I mean, obviously, I can write on a piece of paper that I own something, but there's one thing that is me. I think, therefore, I am. Now, I certainly think there are obligations. There are certain restrictions that need to be followed. You can't go kill people. And that creates a very serious ethical quandary when it comes to the issues of pro-choice versus pro-life. I actually agree with the pro-lifers on so much. Life begins at conception. I think any other argument outside of that is a political manipulation. I think it makes no sense to claim that a single cell or multicellular organism with unique DNA is not life. I just think that's arbitrary. And in fact, the law in many circumstances considers every stage of a human's life from conception onward to be life, particularly when a woman gets attacked and she's pregnant and then she loses the pregnancy, the baby dies. They say that in many instances, not every state, you can actually be charged with involuntary manslaughter, murder, or whatever. So I agree with the pro-lifers on that, but here's where it comes down. I imagine a circumstance in which there is a woman and she goes to the doctor and the doctor says, this is bad. You got a very serious medical issue. Or the woman is raped and she goes to the doctor, and there are exemptions for these in Texas. But now she has to petition the government, have a meeting with someone, discuss to them why they want to do this, what they went through. And I'm just like, and then what happens when a bureaucrat goes, nope, don't believe you. I'm like, yikes. It's a very serious issue for me because I know that it means that there are going to be people who abuse the system and use abortion as contraception, which I think is wrong. But I just don't want the government to be empowered in this way. And and I know people disagree with me. We had a really, really great discussion the other night I love having conversations about this. And no matter what happens, no matter how many good points and honest points and good faith arguments are had, I'm just like, I can't let the government sit there and go through my life and my paperwork. I just don't know where that is. It is a classically like Democrat, traditionally liberal position of what pro-choice was supposed to be. But now we have this. We have people being fired from their jobs for not getting vaccinated. I think that's wrong. Within certain reason. There's another issue here because I often try to err on the side of liberty. And that means I think there's a scale in application of regulation as it pertains to the amount of employees a business has and the type of business, et cetera. What I've said before is like, if there's like a dude and he's hired a handful of people and he's older and he wants everyone to be vaccinated, I don't want to infringe on some small business, small mom and pop shop. And so I just want to be like, okay, maybe there, to an extent you can do whatever you want. But I also think I'm kind of revising that position because I had a lot of good arguments levied against me where they said even a small business shouldn't be allowed to discriminate on the basis of race. And I'm like, that's a good point. Even if you are running a small business and hiring one person, there should be restrictions on who you can discriminate against. So now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, okay, there has to be at the very least medical and religious exemptions to vaccine mandates. But if you're going to mandate a medical procedure, I still think you have crossed the line because there's bodily autonomy. And if we allow for private businesses of any size, like New York City is mostly small businesses, then we start to get to the point where it may as well be a blanket ban. Because I'll tell you this, I am not so obtuse I don't recognize when there are faults in my arguments. Meaning, when I say in New York, it's the small mom and pop shops that are enforcing the vaccine mandate that are making it a problem. And then someone says to me, but didn't you say small mom and pop shops should be allowed to have their staff vaccinated? You know what? That's a really good point. I think I was wrong about that. I think now we should recognize that it's the small mom and pop shops that are holding up the system, and they shouldn't be allowed to do this. And no business should be allowed to discriminate on the basis of medical choices. It's the same for Texas. It's the same for New York. There's no argument. Yet why do we see this? Why do we see the Satanic Temple says abortion laws in Texas violate our religious rights, and the Satanic Temple has taken legal action. If Texas judges abide by the Constitution and legal precedent, then those who share our deeply held beliefs will be exempt from the state's inappropriate efforts to restrict access to abortion services. Okay, I think abortion is wrong. What I mean by that is I think arbitrarily deciding to terminate a baby's life in the womb is wrong. I think life begins at conception. I think that too many people use abortion as contraception because they're irresponsible, and then terminating life, it makes no sense to do this when you made these decisions that led you there. However, as I've already stated, and I don't know what else to say, I can't imagine a scenario where I would be happy going to the government for approval on a medical procedure. And the conundrum that presents me with is that I know people will abuse the system. So I think the real issue, as I've often said, is we need cultural changes. The law can only do so much. You're trying to bring out the hammer when what you need to happen is start teaching children. And that's why I often say we got to teach our kids our values and then make this safe, legal, and rare, right? The Texas law is actually really interesting because it has medical exemptions. It has religion. I think it has medical exemptions. I don't think there's a religious. That's the vaccines. But it also has exemptions for incest and rape, which is shocking to me because I don't think the baby is at fault for those circumstances, incest or rape. But I also think there's an interesting point being made there in the compromise that pro-life individuals have when it comes to the left's argument. When the left says you can't force me to do this, and the pro-lifers say, you're right, we can't, we're not going to. If you were put in this position through no fault of your own, you're right, you didn't choose this and we won't force it to happen. But what they're talking about banning is someone making a choice to engage in intercourse, the woman then getting pregnant and then saying, yeah, well, you know what, I don't want it, so I'm going to terminate. And they're still giving you up to 6 weeks to terminate, and if that's the case. I find it interesting because the left doesn't seem to have any argument or any principles when it comes to vaccine mandates. I can sit here before all of you. I can sit in my show on Timcast IRL with pro-lifers and have an argument. I had Vosh on, and we had Charlie pro-life, me pro-choice, Vosh, I don't know what to call him because I don't think pro-choice is the right word. Charlie and I agree that life begins at conception, but I'm still pro-choice. Vosh said he thinks perhaps some point after birth or at birth, and I'm like, that to me is ridiculous. But we can sit here and have the conversation, right? I can bring up these issues. I can look into the camera and say exactly what I believe, even if people don't want me to say it. So why is it that we don't hear from the Satanic Temple, from these other leftists about the vaccine mandates? And this is what they say to me. No one's forcing you to get the vaccine. Why? No one's forcing me to do it. Why? Are you implying that I could just leave New York? Well, then what's stopping these women from just leaving Texas? You see the point, the problem? This is why I can't stand any of this. Because I have no problem saying pro-choice, even with all of the problems it creates and the things I don't have answers to. I want the government out of this business when it comes to medical stuff, and that includes vaccine mandates. I can say it. And people give me thumbs down, and people give me negative comments. I can say it. Where are you guys at? Now, I'm not saying this is to disrespect the Satanic Temple. No. I'm just wondering where they're going to be at. Let me show you something from February. The Satanic Temple sues Texas over abortion regulations it argues infringe on members' religious beliefs. They say the plaintiff, who according to the lawsuit lives at least 1,000 miles from the nearest abortion clinic in Houston, is challenging the state's mandatory sonogram requirement for an abortion, as well as the mandatory 24-hour waiting period following the sonogram. Lucian Greaves, the co-founder and the spokesperson for the Satanic Temple, said the state's regulations interrupt the group's own ritual for women who receive abortions, which she said is akin to a ritualized counseling process aimed at eliminating shame and guilt for the person receiving the procedure. It's something that's an affirmation and meant to make somebody feel comfortable and secure with their decision. Here's the thing I want to point out. They claimed that requiring a sonogram, as well as a mandatory 24-hour waiting period, violates their bodily autonomy. So how is it not that demanding someone's ID and COVID card is not the same thing? Whether you want to, so the left is saying the Texas Taliban, they're calling it, are forcing women they're forced birthers. That's what they say. It's completely fake because you could just leave. You got exemptions and you got 6 weeks. You just don't like the restrictions. They're arguing that is force, yet they would also argue that a mandatory sonogram and a 24-hour waiting period is force as well, forcing women to carry babies. Then what about New York and their vaccine mandates, and San Francisco and LA and New Orleans? And I think Washington State now is trying to implement something. How is that not force? These people are hypocrites. Now, again, I haven't heard a statement from the Satanic Temple, so I don't mean them, but considering the weight they're putting on this and only this issue, I'd like to see a statement made before I criticize them on, potentially being hypocrites, because they do have some good things on their website I'll point out. Greaves said the state's laws run afoul of 2 of the Satanic Temple's 7 tenets, which include that one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone, and beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world, and one should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's belief. Sounds like the Satanic Temple, which is not a religious organization, which doesn't worship Satan. Okay, they don't. And some people call it a troll. Sounds like we agree. We agree the science should not be distorted, in which case we are often seeking out answers, and we don't have the answers. For instance, there are many studies, and there's data from certain countries showing ivermectin has helped. The FDA has not approved or authorized ivermectin in any way for treatment in COVID, and there are conflicting studies showing that there was no impact. Okay, I want the truth. I am not here to just say, well, Brett Weinstein says something and I like him, so I'm going to believe him. I'm like, yo, if I see a bunch of studies that conflict, I can't give you an answer. You're allowed to believe what you want. So where is the Satanic Temple right now on the issue, the most pressing issues of the day, vaccine mandates? Wouldn't that not violate your bodily autonomy? I have here for you the 7 tenets of the Satanic Temple. They say we believe in reason, empathy, the pursuit of knowledge, and our 7 tenets. Okay, I like reason, empathy, and the pursuit of knowledge. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. 100% agree. That's why I'm so just sick of the vile, angry, spitting and yowling we see from many of these left personalities wishing death on people like Joe Rogan for COVID and stuff. I'll tell you this. Absolutely, I will say the same thing to the Trump supporters who danced on the grave of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I didn't even dance on the grave of John McCain, the warmonger. And I was like, look, I think there's a certain level of respect we can give in death, as much as people, they really hate the guy. And I love there was a meme where it was like every political quadrant, the authoritarian left and right, the libertarian left and right, were all like, burn in hell McCain. And the centrists were like, rest in peace. And I'm like, yeah, I am kind of a centrist because I recognize that he was a human being and loss of life is bad, even for bad people. Even for bad people. I don't believe in the death penalty either. I certainly believe in restricting the power of bad people, shutting them down and stopping these bad things. But I generally think, I don't know. It's tough, right? So there are people on the right who danced on the grave of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I said that was disgusting. And there are people on the right who are mean and nasty and attack for sure. But they don't have institutional authority. They say, the struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. That is 100% a fact. Just because a law or institution has asserted something to be true doesn't mean it's true. And that's why I am where I am. The college institution, 1619, what the schools are saying. True justice is not through their path of identitarianism and authoritarianism. And when they claim that race should be the prerequisite consideration for laws, I say that's wrong. It was always wrong. And we ended that. And now they're trying to put it in laws. That's bad. We should struggle for justice in that regard. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. Agreed. Vaccine mandates violate this. Absolutely. And the Texas law also violates this, which is a very serious challenge. Because when it comes to abortion, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. What about the body of the baby? It's tough, isn't it? The reason I think that we have a problem here is, as I mentioned on the show last night, how do you deal with the rights of an individual with another individual dependent upon it? Now, people pointed out the exemptions in Texas's law, which give 6 weeks for no reason at all, medical, incest, and rape exemptions, in which case you could argue that if your will was to engage in intercourse and you become pregnant, your will was to create the dependency, at which case you are now responsible. I am still pro-choice in the capacity that I don't want to sit down with the government, but it does seem like Texas's law is not banning abortion, but creating safe, legal, and rare. In which case, I wonder what the Satanic Temple's argument actually is in this capacity. If your will was to engage in intercourse, which results in pregnancy, it was your will to do so. Are you arguing that your will changed and thus now the life you've created is to be terminated? Let's read a little bit more. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. And there we have the paradox of the Satanic Temple, which I must point out. If you cannot infringe on the freedoms of others, what the Satanic Temple is really saying is that they do not believe life begins at conception, in which case I do not believe they have a definition of when life does begin. But then there's a question about the Texas law, the heartbeat bill. It doesn't say 6 weeks. It says heartbeat detected. Texas says, here's where we define the beginning of life as a compromise, because pro-lifers already believe it's conception. In which case, if there is a being that you, through your will, created, it now comes to have a heartbeat. And now it is dependent upon you based on the will of your will. Can you then change your mind and cause harm to the other? These are tough questions. But I got to say, the Texas law, maybe 6 weeks is too short. But if a heartbeat is where you would define a viable life, certainly there's a limit. And for them to come out and just blindly oppose the law in Texas without consideration or debate, I wonder if they actually believe what they're saying. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs. I completely agree to that as well. And that's why I say, if I see multiple studies like ivermectin that are conflicted and there's no EUA on it, what do you want me to say about it? I can't just blindly agree with Brett Weinstein because I happen to like him better. And I think Brett's a fantastic guy. I think he's a good dude, moral and principled. But why would I just trust him over other people? Because I know him? I can't do it. And I agree with this. I don't think they agree with this. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. I wish that were the case. I really, really do, because I agree with it. I just don't think we see it. How often has the media issued corrections on fake news? They don't care. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. I want to point out, they do not worship Satan. They say, do you worship Satan? No, nor do we believe in the existence of Satan or the supernatural. Okay. I don't like the word supernatural because it's an ignorant way to describe the unknown. If we are men of science, humans of science, men and women of science, certainly we recognize that supernatural is just the idea of things we don't understand, or the implication there are things we don't understand, right? If you're going to say there's no Satan, there's no God, well, my argument is you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know, and you know there are things you don't know, and we know we don't know everything about the universe. So these ideas of Satan, God, at the very least, I think agnosticism is the appropriate way to go if you are of science. But regardless, that's just semantics. They don't believe they don't worship Satan or anything like that. My question is, looking at this stuff, what do you believe, your tenets? After reading, now I got to be honest, after reading these tenets, when I'm producing this segment, I had that thought about the Texas abortion bill. It doesn't outright ban abortion. It gives 6 weeks for no reason at all. A woman can go and get an abortion. Life is determined at the heartbeat, they say, which is a compromise because conservatives don't agree with that. And the Satanic Temple says the freedoms of others should be respected. I suppose what they're saying then is they don't consider a fetus of the heartbeat to be a living being. I don't know what else you would call it, and I think that's a lie. In which case, safe, legal, and rare makes sense. The pro-lifers aren't getting what they want. They want an outright ban on abortion. No opportunity for any abortion. Texas is still offering women 6 weeks. Now, I suppose this is a slippery slope argument. They do 6 weeks, and then they eventually start eroding it, and they argue timelines. Okay. Satanic Temple. I say only this. I agree with you on so much. Will you come out, speak out against vaccine mandates, which violate the same tenets you so espouse when it comes to abortion? I'm not convinced. I'm not going to hold my breath. But hey, if I see it, I'll believe it. And then you'll have my respect. In regards to what's going on in Texas, if you've got, they say a woman doesn't even know if she's pregnant until about 2 weeks into the pregnancy. Then it can be inconclusive. They say maybe it's about a month because they backdate pregnancy. You'll have 2 weeks. Is that enough time? I don't know. I honestly don't. I haven't dealt with it. Do you? The only thing I can say is, if it's the heartbeat bill, and you're arguing you should be able to get an abortion literally at any time, and that means you don't care that there's an exception for rape, medical, or incest, which I think is the appropriate reasons. Actually, I don't completely agree with incest or rape, but I understand the freedom argument. So, pro-choice. All you're really saying is you want to be able to use abortion as contraception. How about you use a condom or take birth control, right? I don't understand. I really, really don't understand their argument. The bill doesn't take away the procedure. Whatever, I suppose. Whatever. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.